Germany, the world's fourth largest economy, is increasingly looking like a pawn under America's control. This isn't just speculative, it's a concern echoed by many of you in our comments. So today, we're taking a closer look. From a turbulent history to economic ties and political decisions, let's look at the reality of Germany's overeager reliance on America. Welcome to Living History. To begin, let's wind back the clock and start just after World War II, when the Marshall Plan kicked in. A gesture of aid? Perhaps. But this act of generosity also tethered Germany to the US economically. You see, from 1948 to 1952, Germany received over $1.4 billion in aid, which is about $15 billion in today's money. More crucially, this period saw West Germany depending on the US for protection against the threat of the Soviet Union. The presence of US military bases and personnel in West Germany served as a defense strategy. In fact, Germany hosted the largest portion of US troops in Europe, with roughly 38,600 military personnel, more than the US maintained in any other country except Japan. This presence, however, was only the start of a deeper dependency. As we fast forward to 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall marked a pivotal moment. The unification of Germany wasn't just a merger of territories, but a fusion of ideologies and resources from both the Soviet-influenced East and the Western-aligned West. This significant change propelled Germany's GDP to soar, reaching $2.5 trillion by 1995 and positioning it as a near superpower. But then the US noticed Germany's growing independence. The opposition to the Iraq War in 2003 was a glaring example of this. Germany, defying US expectations, refused to support the war, a decision that resonated across the globe. It was a bold statement of autonomy that made the US nervous. Another instance was Germany's push for the Nord Stream gas pipeline project with Russia. This project, seen as economically beneficial to Germany, was a move away from US energy influences and a step towards energy partnerships outside of America's control. More on that later though. Germany's stance on the Iran nuclear deal further underscored its independent streak. When the US withdrew from the agreement, Germany, along with other European nations, not only criticized this decision, but also sought ways to keep the deal alive, contrary to US interests. These decisions highlighted that Germany wasn't just America's ally, it was now a player with its own rules. The US couldn't have that. They needed Germany, but on their terms. The strategy: use a historic common enemy, Russia. America positioned itself as the defender against the Russian threat, a narrative Germany easily bought into. But for the US, it wasn't about defense, it was about aligning German policies with US interests. As a result, in NATO, Germany's transformation was evident. Initially positioned as a frontline state against the Soviet threat, it soon became a linchpin in US-led initiatives following the fall of the Soviet Union. Take, for instance, the Afghanistan mission post 9/11. Germany didn't just participate, it became one of the largest troop contributors, aligning directly with US strategic objectives in the region. And when it came to economic policies, Germany's support for US-led sanctions against Russia in the aftermath of the 2014 annexation of Crimea showcased a clear alignment with American foreign policy. The story is similar in the UN. Germany's voting patterns often echoed those of the US, particularly on critical issues. For example, on resolutions concerning the Middle East, Germany frequently sided with the US, displaying a diplomatic stance that closely mirrored American interests. Another notable instance is Germany's stance on China's human rights issues, where it has often supported US-initiated resolutions, further indicating a synchronization with US policies on global matters. Let's zoom in for a moment on the economic leash that's been tightening around Germany. The US holds a significant place in Germany's economy as its largest trading partner, with exports reaching €118.4 billion in 2020. Yet, this relationship isn't as straightforward as it seems. The US Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, while aimed at protecting American industries, poses a significant challenge for German exports. This act has led to a noticeable decline in sales of German products in the US. The fallout from such US policies is felt not only in the boardrooms of German companies, but also in the daily lives of ordinary Germans. Another thorny situation for Germany is the recent Ukraine conflict, and the untimely cutoff from Russian gas as a result of sanctions imposed by the US and the EU. While these events are critical, they're just the tip of the iceberg. To understand this, we need to rewind to the era of former Chancellor Gerhard Schröder. Schröder's tenure marked a pivotal turn in Germany's energy policy. His close ties with Russia, epitomized by his later role in Russian energy giant Gazprom, laid the groundwork for Germany's heavy reliance on Russian energy. But what's often overlooked is the US angle in this narrative. The US, while seemingly distant, has always had a vested interest in European energy dynamics. The more Europe, Germany included, depended on Russian energy, the more it needed US support in terms of security and political backing. Adding to this, Germany's move away from nuclear energy post-Chernobyl and Fukushima intensified its dependency on foreign energy sources, notably Russian gas. In fact, by 2020, about 55% of Germany's gas imports were from Russia. This choice was strategic. Russian gas was not only more affordable compared to American LNG, but it also seemed to offer a diversification of energy supply away from nuclear. However, the Ukraine war in 2022 exposed the risks of this dependency, which of course brings us to the Nord Stream pipeline sabotage. Though lacking direct evidence of US involvement, it ironically benefited American LNG exporters by forcing Europe to seek alternative sources of gas. Interesting, isn't it? Add to that Germany's muted response and quiet acceptance of overpriced American LNG imports, and a worrying picture emerges. This pattern of dependency isn't limited to energy though. Let's look at the military aspect. Germany's defense spending has long been a contentious issue, with the US persistently urging for higher NATO contributions. Yielding to this pressure, Germany unveiled a major increase in defense spending in 2022, aiming to meet US expectations. Chancellor Olaf Scholz announced a groundbreaking €100 billion fund for military procurement, marking a departure from Germany's traditional restraint in military matters. What is, however, even more curious is the German government's substantial procurement of US-made hardware, which represents a significant portion of its defense budget. For German taxpayers, this defense spending is a major reallocation of significant funds, which inevitably means other areas get less attention or funding. Now, what does all this mean for the German people? The impact is multifaceted. Economically, dependencies mean higher costs, particularly in the energy sector, directly affecting household budgets. In healthcare, the picture isn't so rosy either. With the health budget slashed from €64.4 billion in 2022 to a mere €16.2 billion next year, hospitals are grappling with a financial crunch. Then there's also infrastructure, where the story isn't much brighter. Germany's construction industry is lagging, with growth crawling at just 1.7% annually, below the European average. This is all forcing people to seek opportunities elsewhere, contributing significantly to a brain drain, as skilled and educated individuals seek better prospects outside of Germany. If you want to know more about the challenges Germany is currently facing, check out our next video linked here. See you there.